What does your iPhone have to do with child labor, the pillage of natural resources, and genocide? Some current and former Apple employees think a lot. I'm Anelise Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we look into allegations questioning Apple's and big tech in general's purpose, culture, and strategy, and what you, as a consumer, should know and do about it.
I'm no longer saying free Congo, I'm saying stand up for Congo and fight. Apple, we're no longer asking you, we're demanding you. You either let our people go, and we're not going to let you rest. We're not going to breathe. We're going to be on your neck 24/7. Free Palestine!
Bombs are dropping!
While you're shopping, bombs are dropping!
While you're shopping, bombs are dropping!
While you're shopping, bombs are dropping!
When the new iPhone launched back in September, there were not just long queues of loyal customers waiting outside Apple stores. Protesters across several cities around the world demanded Apple stop sourcing mineral components from the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is because mines there are known for dangerous conditions, low wages, use of child labor, and other human rights violations. Many of those demonstrators also signed an open letter asking for Apple executives to, quote, end their silence on Palestinian suffering and the war on Gaza. And to talk about the convergence of these struggles, we have joining us today writer and activist Tariq Raouf, a leading Apple's Against Apartheid organizer. Maurice, Carney, the co-founder and executive director of the Friends of the Congo, reporter and producer for Al Jazeera's Listening Post, Nicholas Muirhead, and Roshan Dadoo from South Africa's Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Coalition. Thank you all so much for being part of the stream today. Tariq, let me start with you. You worked at an Apple store in Seattle for some 12 years before being fired in July. Just so people don't accuse you of being a disgruntled ex-employee, can you share with us why you started Apple's Against Apartheid and the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been at this company over several stores. I've worked at Apple support. I love this company. And so I knew as soon as I started bringing up these concerns that they would try and cast me off as exactly what you said, right? A disgruntled employee who's just kind of upset at the company. But the fact of the matter is that I love this company. I grew up wanting to work there. I love the products. I believe in them. Like everything that I'm using right now is Apple's. It's ironic, you know, like like many of us in this tech culture, many of us fanboys, right? We tend to just kind of love Apple with no critique. A lot of people tend to love Apple with no critique. And I've always thought that love without critique is just obsession. And that's why I've chosen to really critique Apple, because I believe that in order for a company to truly be its best, in order for a company to truly succeed, you have to acknowledge the wrongs that your company is doing and not pretend like you're perfect. The more that you're perfect, more everything goes south.
Very interesting. Maurice, Friends of the Congo, which you represent, has also been attempting to draw attention to the fact that the DRC is being drained of its resources and the big tech has a lot to do with it. Are you able to paint a brief picture for us here of what that pillage looks like today?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. What the pillage looks like today is entirely consistent with what the pillage looked like yesterday when King Leopold II of Belgium owned the Congo and pillaged it for up to $1 billion at the expense of an estimated 10 million Congolese people. That is to say, Congo was designed for extraction of natural resources coming out of the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference. And to this very day, that blueprint, that design remains in place, where the country is being plundered at the expense of the Congolese people. And I'll give you a classic example of how that is. We have estimated 110 million people in the Congo. According to the World Bank, up to about 70 million of them live on less than $2.15 a day. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, you have this Israeli billionaire by the name of Dan Gertler, who's been sanctioned by the Department of Treasury of the United States for allegedly corrupt practices in the Congo. And he gains royalties of around $200,000 a day. Now, one individual, Dan Gertler, Israeli billionaire, $200,000 a day. Up to 70 million Congolese people, less than $2.15 a day. So that's a classic case of a country where economists say there's an estimated $24 trillion worth of resources there that is being plundered, that is being pilfered, to the detriment of the Congolese people in terms of loss of life, in terms of health, abject poverty, and living in bestial conditions. So the Congolese people are fighting and organizing to overturn that system. This is systemic and structural legacy of colonialism. And that's what's at the heart of this matter. How is it that the Congolese people can reclaim their land, reclaim their resources, reclaim their wealth, reclaim their affairs, and ultimately arrive at resource sovereignty for the benefit of the sons and daughters of the Congo?
We're going to talk a little bit more later in the show about the brutal conditions you described. But while researching for this episode, we came across this moment between Dua Lipa and Tim Cook. Take a look.
Dua Lipa challenged Apple's Tim Cook with this question.
I guess what I was wondering is my new iPhone 15, like, can you guarantee that the cobalt that's in that phone has not been mined, like using child labor in the DRC?
Yes, we can.
Companies like Apple have been criticized in the past for not properly checking to see if their suppliers are connected to child labor or human rights violations. But Apple announced in 2023 that they will use 100% recycled cobalt in their batteries by 2025, and that their newest iPhone already contains recycled cobalt.
This is a big idea of not having to mine anything, is to use all recycled material.
Apple said recycling is possible, partly due to its trade-in program. Cook also said Apple has
an intense level of tracing in our supply chain all the way back to the mine and the smelter to make sure that the labor used is not child labor.
So Apple has said that it does not source minerals from mines in which these conditions take place. And it's also said there are challenges in tracking its mineral supply chains. Back in 2022, this tracking led to the company removing 12 suppliers. Nick, you've been to the DRC. Are there differences between what is called, I don't know, the regulated official mines and those more artisanal ones? How do they compare in terms of safety standards, but also human rights?
Well, so yes, there is a difference. You've got the industrial mining sector and the artisanal mining sector. Now, my time spent in the DRC, I didn't get inside an industrial mine. You need to go through a whole different channel of permission to get inside one of those mines. They're all owned by private companies, which will tell you that their mining practices are ethical, that they adhere to the safety regulations, and that they've cleaned up their act in the last 10 years. It is not the same to be said about artisanal mines, which is the unregulated sector. These are people with very little recourse, financial recourse, as Maurice was describing. They are being exploited. They are going into mines and eking out a living in very dangerous conditions. And that's where I had a small glimpse of. And to think that we are all, anyone with an iPhone or a laptop, an electric car, we're all kind of complicit in this. And then when you see it happening on the ground, it's heartbreaking to see that level of exploitation taking place.
Which is precisely why we're having this conversation here today, right? It's because we're all part of it. It's not like we're all going to ditch our phones and electric cars, and the transition to greener energy passes through this. So how can we make it all better? I mean, Roshan, you represent BDS, a movement that has succeeded in holding corporations, big companies, accountable for their involvement in Israeli occupation. What methods, strategies would you say could be applied to Apple and to the tech industry in general in terms of its shortcomings and to make it better, like Tariq was saying?
Absolutely. I think, if we look at the BDS movement, the Palestinian call was made in 2005, and it was modeled very closely on the call we made during our struggle against apartheid on the international community. And it's really a call to organize, mobilize, and for people power to be able to shift the actions of states, in this case, Israel. And I think what's important to note is the complete interconnectedness between our struggles. So when we're calling for BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, and there is a Tech Against Apartheid campaign, because, of course, it's not just Apple, it's also what the tech companies, they're exploiting us in our continent, as has been said, but they're also complicit in the genocide now taking place and the illegal occupation within Palestine. So it's one struggle. It's the same. We're targeting the same companies who are complicit in both cases, and I think that can be very powerful. I mean, the name Dan Gertler was mentioned already. He has been one of the main exporters of Congolese minerals, diamonds, copper, cobalt. And as has been said, the amount of money that he has accrued out of this compared to the average wage or income of the people in the Congo is extremely disproportionate. But he was also representing, in a sense, the Israeli interests in Africa. And they've been meddling in the Congo since 1960, when they first opened their embassy. They even, the ambassador at that time, even expressed the wish that Lumumba would disappear, and that his hope for this, it was not unimaginable that his hope for this would come true. And since then, through all of different governments in the Congo, Israel has been present and is still meddling today. And so when we're calling for no tech against apartheid, when we're saying, write to your companies, protest at stores, take action, raise up the issues, as Dua Lipa did, if you have that opportunity to speak directly to them, but flood them with emails, keep asking the questions, keep up the pressure. Companies really getting bad reputations. Increasingly, they're so concerned about brand and image. It's quite amazing how effective BDS can be. And we have to remember that it was the Palestinian people themselves that have called on us, as we did on the international community. Plus, there's now actually a legal obligation after the ICJ ruling and the UN General Assembly resolution last month.
It's so disheartening, isn't it? The more we learn about these connections, but also it's so, I don't know, it's an interesting moment. We feel like there's so much light being shed into all these different questions. Tariq, I want to go back to you, because you didn't fully answer my question before when I asked you about being potentially a disgruntled former employee, because you talked about being a fanboy and really loving Apple. I wanted to know more about Apple's Against Apartheid, because you guys even published an open letter which alleged that retail and corporate employees were being disciplined or wrongfully terminated for supporting the Palestinian people by wearing pins, bracelets. And that letter read, "We, current and previous employees of Apple, wish to express our disappointment and shock at the lack of care and understanding this company has given the Palestinian community, not only abroad, suffering in Gaza, but also towards our own team members and anyone who supports them within our stores and offices." What's been happening within Apple, would you say? Can you cite some concrete examples in terms of being silenced or being disciplined for your support for the Palestinian cause?
Yeah, there's a mass anti-Palestinian silencing happening at Apple. One of the first things that happened a month after the genocide started was Apple shut down the Muslim at Apple Slack channel. It's an employee resource group for Muslim employees at the company to gather and communicate. And what was happening was Zionists were coming into that room, flooding it with hate and propaganda, saying that your opinions are wrong. They're explaining why Israel has to bomb churches and schools. And they're saying that the Muslims in the group were terrorists. And instead of moderating that space, and instead of punishing the people that were coming into that space and posting this awful stuff, they were deleting messages from the Muslim employees. And they even fired an employee from that Slack channel who had posted a Quran verse in Arabic, which is ironic given that it was the Muslim Slack channel. And that was like one of the very first things that they started in terms of silencing voices. They shut down, because of the racism, they just shut down the group entirely. They also shut down the Jewish Apple Slack channel, to be fair. But a year after this genocide, they have not provided a space like that. They've not opened that group back up, despite several meetings with executives. And they've also told retail employees all around the world that you are not allowed to wear keffiyehs or pins, like little maps of your like Palestinian flag, because they said that they're creating a harmful environment or they're putting the team at risk. And they're failing to acknowledge what is giving the harm. It's not the Palestinian wearing the necklace, it's the Zionists coming in and reproaching them, you know, like it's horrific. And it's a systemic silencing of voices. And they've fired employees for wearing pro-Palestinian merchandise. They fired me after 8 months of, you know, starting Apple's against apartheid and trying to really like fight them.
So do you feel there is a connection?
It seems.
Do you feel you were fired because you started this movement? We obviously reached out to Apple so that they would be part of this conversation and could defend themselves, but they declined our invitation, or at least did not respond.
Of course they declined. I wanted to say, of course they declined, because they want to stay as far away from the subject as remotely possible. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to do anything, but they opened in Israel. And it's just so ironic that they refuse to comment on the subject when they are so heavily involved within Israel. I just found that funny.
Maurice, I want to ask you more about the conditions on the ground for the people of Congo. But first, here's a segment of a film your collective is launching very soon. Let's take a look.
J'ai une souffrance donc produit mais comme nous exploitons 10 qualités les produits mon café manganèse cuivre cobalt fer mais avant ta pousse il est kama ni cobalt batapuza cobalt kama ni cuivre banauza chato kutumika na bazungu hii crezage iranzia ni kwa baba yetu. Kwa bariwa Luanzo, kutumika Luanzo, anatuambia kama mnenda fashi fulani peko mkende fashi fulani mnatumika mtapata cuivre, mtapata cobalt, ndio vile papa wanaanza kutumika. Tena mwile idea ya papa njoo ile idea na shie pour le moment.
Kambo yangu mwini. Kambo yangu mwini kamimbi.
Sasa ile 40 familia ndio.
Inaenda inapoteza akili kunipa fedha, wao niwapatia fedha. Wao niwapatia yana katala sema mimi hapana watanilipa fedha na kupika mkubwa. Kama hapana watoto watayuwaka kaji. Bwana bakia bana hoteli peleka fashi kana yeye sema hapana watoto watasabu wako. Watoto yuwaka kama tulanda kwa ifite. Kumi ni yakwe kufika 67 wanapokea fedha ya mwisho.
Injo reference ni mkubwa, ndio reference yetu vraiment. Tunaenda na kujua kule historia ya Malakit inaanzia.
Beko ba krezer bale basha kuyenga mama somo.
Maurice, we see there are men, but also women, in some cases, children involved in the extraction of minerals. And as we said at the start, conditions are brutal in some cases, but sometimes this is the only option for people. This is how they live, and the only thing that the only source of funds to survive. And there are a number of studies that have revealed that a boycott of the tech sector would actually have a very negative impact on these people. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and then what is left for us to do?
Yeah, what you see there is, in terms of Congolese being engaged in artisanal mining, is a product of the system that's in place, the capitalist system, that has imposed systemic poverty on the Congolese people, which leave them with little options. In the artisanal mining sector, there's up to 2 million Congolese engaged, and they have an impact on up to an additional about 5 times their population. So it's a central part of survival for the Congolese people. Mm-hmm. And the film that you just saw, that you just played from the Cuba, is an effort on the part of Friends of the Congo, the Basanja coalition, to elevate what is the stories of the miners and the diggers, who I must say are extremely well organized. They're organized into collectives of tens of thousands of diggers. And as you saw from the film, their key demands, they have several key demands. One is they want to be beneficiaries of their own resources. Mm-hmm. They see multinational corporations, see the Chinese, the Americans, the Canadians coming in and capturing their wealth. Mm-hmm. So they're organizing themselves to control their own resources for the benefit of the sons and daughters of the Congo. And what can we do? Well, we can support them. This show, for example, in highlighting the point of view of the diggers through the film, which we're going to be releasing as a part of our Congo Week initiative, that is key. Getting their voices out, getting their demands out, getting their concerns out. And what we can do is to rally to support them by telling their stories, providing them with a platform to share their demands, their concerns, their challenges. So there's a tremendous amount that we can do. Spread the word, continue to apply pressure, not just on Apple, but on the entire tech industry, the automobile industry. In 2008, Antonio Guterres, he wasn't Secretary General of the UN then, but he gave an interview to the Financial Times. And he said, we must not forget that the international community has systematically looted the Congo. Therefore, our response must be systemic in nature, right? There's people of the world rally behind the Congo and the Congolese people in order to support them in their quest to control and determine their own affairs. That is what we need to do.
And we must not normalize a situation where 70 million people live under $2.15 a day, as you said. Roshan, in terms of how we as consumers can try and bring about change, what would be your advice?
Well, if I can give one example. So we've already twice mentioned Dan Gertler. He partnered with Glencore, and they, within the DRC, are one of the largest exploitative and extremely corrupt companies that are behind the mining and the, as has been described, the terrible conditions, the systemic kind of oppression that is going on there. Glencore also is the largest commodities trading company in the world, I think. It mines coal in Colombia. It mines coal in South Africa. Now, coal is being imported. Number one importer was Colombia by Israel to fuel, obviously, the illegal occupation and now more recently the military and the genocide. The Colombian government president announced that they would stop selling coal to Israel. Now, this is actually a legal obligation on all countries, and we are campaigning hard here for Glencore to stop selling its coal from South Africa to Israel, as we are legally obliged to do by the ICJ rulings and the General Assembly vote to implement those rulings. So you can see how connected the struggles are. And so as we're raising up the issues around Glencore and trying to stop complicity in the genocide of the Palestinian people, we're also working with the Congolese community here and giving the Congolese community platforms on Palestinian protests and marches and meetings. And we are also getting platforms on their events so we can draw these links. And so we can target our boycotts, target our actions and our activities, and we can make a difference. If Colombia can stop being the largest seller of coal from Glencore to Israel, I'm convinced that we can stop Glencore and other mining companies here from doing the same. And in doing so, we're putting pressure to take up the issues that are being discussed around the Congo. So I absolutely think the struggles are connected, interconnected, and solidarity isn't charity. Solidarity is beneficial to all of us. As we're active in one case, we're also able to raise up and be active in other cases as well.
Solidarity isn't charity. And on that, we'll leave today's episode. Roshan, Tariq, Maurice, and Nick, thank you so much for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep this conversation going online. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.